One of the things the Book of Common Prayer states that Lent is to be a time of self-examination, which takes time. So I hope you'll forgive me in advance because the sermon might be a tad longer than usual. No laughing. That's funny. A tad longer because Lent is a time of penitence and self-sacrifice. So it's okay if I preach just as long as maybe some of those pastors around the world in other countries, say 40 minutes or so. Got a little more laugh there, that's good. It won't be that long. Don't worry, you get to dinner. You will get to dinner. But it will be long enough, not too long. But we're wasting time, so let's get into it. If you take a moment to think back to your years in high school, your years in grade school, your years in middle school, whichever is your favorite, grad school, college, wherever. For some of us, those were the glory days. For other of us, a time that we just want to forget. Can you see yourself? Hair-sprayed bangs, hammer pants, tight-rolled jeans, whatever it might be, Coke bottle glasses. Now, raise your hand if you liked being tested. I see none. I was expecting a few, but I see none. Whether or not we like being tested, there are some people out there who love to be tested. Whether or not we like it or not, tests help us learn, help us grow. How many of us would want to go to the doctor who hadn't been tested in school? Who knows what they actually would have learned? How many of us would like to ride in a car which the metal frame wasn't tested to see how much stress and strain it could take? Who knows if the frame would actually hold us up or hold itself together in a crash? Testing, no matter how useful in our day and age, still carries with it this negative sense. Maybe because most of us just don't like being put to the test. Bible scholar William Barclay, one of my favorites, says this about testing temptation. What we call temptation is not meant to make us sin. It is meant to enable us to conquer sin. It is not meant to make us bad. It is meant to make us good. It is not meant to weaken us. It is meant to make us emerge stronger, finer, purer from the ordeal. Temptation is not the penalty of being human. Temptation is the glory of being human. It is the test which comes to those whom God wishes to use. Here on this first Saturday night in Lent, we read the story of the temptation of Jesus in the wilderness. And in my mind, it's rightly chosen to be by the church the first Sunday of Lent every Sunday. Because many of us, or every first Sunday of Lent, does that make sense? Every first Sunday of Lent. Because many of us, no doubt, are dealing with a rise in amount of temptations. You open that cabinet door and you see the chocolate sitting there. Ooh, and it's calling your name, come eat me, come eat me. You ready to go home after a stressful day, looking forward to a cool, refreshing libation, only to get there and have a glass of water. Feeling a bit quite hungry, putting off the urge to grab that snack that's just an arm's length away. A lot of temptation, a lot of temptation. And in this year's lectionary cycle, our material comes from the Gospel of Matthew, right after Jesus was baptized and preceding the Sermon on the Mount. And that's significant because after his baptism, Jesus had a job to do. And before he jumped into it with 2 feet, he had to properly be filled up and strengthened. Therefore, the Spirit led him out to the wilderness, where in his weakness he was tested by the evil one. Now, some might question why Jesus had to do this. Well, he had to get focused in. He had to quiet his flesh. Jesus was fully man, fully God. And his spirit needed to be strengthened, that it would sing out more abundantly as he would go out to do the Father's work. Now, we've already said that all of us don't like being tested. We even pray not to be tempted in the Lord's Prayer, don't we? Saying, and lead us not into temptation. Likewise, when trouble comes, we cry out, Lord, get me out of this, help me now. But here's the thing, even Jesus had to be tested. Now, in the wake of our healing mission last weekend, this being open to testing isn't the same as accepting the disease, the traumas, the junk this world throws at us, calling it our thorn in our flesh. By no means. God doesn't want any of that for us. All of that comes to us from living in a sin-filled and broken world. And that's why we continue to pray for healing, for ourselves, for our friends, for our family, for the world in which we live. Now, along with the realities of living in a sin-filled and broken world comes the temptations of the evil one. And thank God, just as Jesus was tempted in every way as we are, there is no one better than he to help us out and lead us out of that temptation when it rears its nasty head. As the author of Hebrews says, because he himself suffered when he was tempted, he is able to help those who are being tempted. Now, as I see some eyes glazing over, enough theology for the night. Let's get a little practical. The actual temptations of Jesus. So the first test of Jesus, he is tempted to transform ordinary stones into loaves of bread so that he could eat them. Here, Jesus was being tested to use his powers as a son of God for selfish reasons. But Jesus, knowing the loving kindness of his Father, waits upon his Father with open hands, seeking strength in his time of weakness. And brothers and sisters, we are bombarded every day with messages from the culture around us to get whatever we want whenever we want it, to enjoy ourselves even if we can't afford it, because we owe it to ourselves. To actually say no to the things the world says we need, some of which we really, really, really want, is very countercultural. And it's exactly what Jesus did. Sometimes we need to deny ourselves the small things so that there's room for greater things. Lent is a great time to do that, but not so that we can get more of what we want, but in order that we can seek what God wants for us. The second test of Jesus, he finds himself at the highest pinnacle of the temple and is tempted to throw himself down, testing God's promise. Jesus knows the Father's rescuing power is not something to be experimented with. It is something to trust in every day. Often we expect God to come to our aid in the ways that we want. Sometimes we even give God an ultimatum, saying, Lord, you do this, and I'll believe. And I'll bring all of my friends to church, I promise. Or, Lord, if you can't deliver on this one tiny little thing, I'm out of here. I'll see you later. Remember in the Garden of Gethsemane, God didn't answer Jesus' prayer to let the cup, which was placed before him, his call to self-sacrifice on the cross, to pass. God didn't rescue Jesus from what his flesh cried out for, because God's plan was bigger. And so Jesus trusted in God's plan and remembered God's promise, never to leave him nor forsake him. No one, not even Jesus himself, knows the mind of the Father. But Jesus did know that the Father was always there and trusted in his ways. Yet when things go awry, as they did in Jesus' life, and we start getting hit with the devil's lies, that God is not listening, that maybe we believe that God's not acting or he's not doing his job, then we answer as Jesus did, pointing to God, saying, do not put the Lord your God to the test. The third test of Jesus, he's in the very high place, able to see all the kingdoms of the world. And it was the world Jesus came to save. And here he is tempted to sidestep the cross, if only he would bow down and worship Satan himself. All Satan wants is a compromise. For God's own Son to pair up with the prince of darkness. Satan desires no less to a compromise from all of us. Do you recall the man who came to Jesus and said, "Teacher, I will follow you wherever you go. But first, let me do this. Let me go bury my father." And Jesus said to the man, "Follow me, and let the dead bury their own dead." It's easy for all of us to say, "Yes, Lord, I'm yours, I'm yours. Wait, what? 1 minute, I got to go do this over here, and then I'll be yours. Oh, wait, I got to do this over here. Oh, now I'll be yours. Wait, one more thing, I go do this over here." It's easy to do that. But let me be clear, there is no compromise when it comes to God. Why would there be? He is God, we're not. He wants our all in all. He wants to be first. He is not a God of leftovers, nor of being an afterthought. Satan's last temptation is to get Jesus to reorder his priorities, to take the easy route, to look out for number one. But Jesus knows evil cannot be defeated by compromising with evil. The evil one cannot remain where the light of Christ exists, nor stand in the power of God's truth. So when enough was enough, Jesus commanded to Satan to flee, and he did, acknowledging that the sole duty of man is to worship the Lord your God and serve him only. Lent. Long enough, not too long. A great time to practice for Christians, to get real, to grow, saying no to some things that we would make room for God in our life, creating some time, some space to learn how to trust, not to test our God, and to get our priorities where they need to be, with God sitting in the driver's seat. So this means training. This means discipline. This means practice. And as I've said before, I don't like to practice. I'm not a person of practice. The things that I do try to practice, mostly my sermon. I don't know if it's helping. But this Lent, I have high hopes for myself and my family. And all I need to do, and I encourage all of us to do the same thing, is to do what Vladimir Horowitz did, the great pianist. He put his money where his mouth is. For he knew that if he skipped practice one day, he'd know it. If he skipped practice 2 days, the critics knew it. If he skipped practice 3 days, everyone knew it. Vladimir didn't want to show the people what he wasn't. He wanted to show the people what he was, an amazing and marvelous musician. So what is it that we want to show the world around us in word, in action, in how we spend our time, our resources, how we orient our lives? We don't want to show people whose we are not. We want to show the world around us whose we are, right? Especially when times of testing arise. Showing a better way to operate and orient one's life. Firstly, so that God may be glorified. Second, to model and witness to a hurting world around us how they too can come to know the God of this world, who is love, who is full of healing, who is better than we can ever know. All that comes from being in an active, a growing, a real relationship with the God of this world. Now, beloved, I realize that this sermon is a little longer than normal. So if you faded at some moment, that's okay. Just tune in right now. Remember, perfect love casts out fear. And there is to be no fear when testing or temptation arises in our lives, because God has got our back. God's got our back. Isn't that great? As 1 Corinthians 10:13 says, no testing has overtaken man that is not common to everyone. God is faithful. He will not let you be tested beyond your strength, But with the testing, he will also provide the way out so that you may be able to stand underneath it or endure it. What is Lent? Long enough and not too long. Long enough and not too long to practice, to pray, to worship, to fast, to do some self-examination that we might someday get it right. All the time being sanctified and becoming holy as he is holy. Amen.